record it. Erev Tov, we are in Parashat Tazria. And today we're discussing Milah and with the connection to Pesach. But since we'll start from Parashat HaChodesh or from some other things, and then we'll go close to Milah and Pesach. You have to remember before we start that the only two mitzvot that we have chorus on them are Milah and Pesach, mitzvot aseh, because we have a lot of mitzvot lo ta'aseh. The Rambam in several places writes that the goal of the Torah is to get into Chayei Olam Haba, and the punishment is karet, that Adam is disconnected from the tree of life, from Judaism or Asagat HaElokut, whatever it means. And then he's disconnected and falls to the limbo. He's not connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we can understand that if somebody eats on Yom Kippur or somebody makes a koret, then he is mechalel Shabbat without din ve'atra. So then we say that it's such a severe avera that he is punished with a koret. But if he makes a mitzvah aseh, he doesn't make it, it's very weird that he'll have karet. And even though we find only two mitzvahs, Milah and Pesach, in which we have, if you don't do it, you have karet. If you don't get into, you don't, you're Torah, even though you don't make Pesach, so then you have a karet, because you have an opportunity to join Am Yisrael, to join nationality, and even though you don't do it, so therefore you have a karet. And if you don't circumcise yourself or whatever your son, so then you have karet as well. Okay, so let's.
Sorry, is the karet for the father or the son?
So it's a karet for the father, but at the age of 13, as a father is no longer responsible, and there it's Beidin or as a person himself. Okay, it's a machloket Rambam and Ravid whether as each and every second the one that doesn't circumcise himself has a koret, or that he doesn't have a koret because in each second he might circumcise himself. Just if chas v'sholom he goes and dies without being circumcised, there lemafrea retrospectively he has karet. Okay, but till when he is a child, of course, he doesn't have a karet. Afterwards, if im ha'aba lo mal, it's chiyuv beis din. And if Beidin, if he's a gadol, so then the chiyuv is on himself. Okay, let's start from tefillin. As we said, we'll go to Milah and Pesach at the end of the shiur. So tefillin, as you know, we have 4 parshiot. 2 at the end of Parashat Bo. We just read Parashat HaChodesh on Shabbat, which is Perek Yud Bet on Shmot, and now we'll deal with Perek Yud Gimel. מדבר השם אל משה לאמור, קדש לי, the first parasha of תפילין, כן, קדש לי כל בכור, of the 4, okay, I'm not in the סדר, פטר כל רחם באדם ובבהמה הוא, ויאמר משה אל העם, why should you make קדושת בכורה? זכור את היום הזה אשר יצאתם ממצרים מבית עבדים, כי בחוזק יד הוציא השם אתכם מזה ולא יאכל חמץ, היום אתם יוצאים בחודש האביב, והיה כי יביאך השם אל ארץ הכנעני וכולי וכולי, 7 ימים תאכל מצות, והגדת לבנך ביום ההוא לאמור, בעבור זה עשה השם לי בצאתי ממצרים. Okay, so we know that the answer is given כאילו in the Haggadah to the Ben Rasha, but it doesn't matter. Why do we do תפילין? והיה לך לאות על ידך ולזיכרון בין עיניך, למען תהיה תורת השם בפיך, כי ביד חזקה הוציאך השם ממצרים. So the first parasha, קדש לי כל בכור, is meant to the person that wears the tefillin in order to remember יציאת מצרים. The second parasha, והיה כי יביאך השם אל ארץ הכנעני כאשר נשבע לאחיו ולאבותיך ועברת כל פטר רחם להשם וכל פטר שגר בהמה וכולי וכולי. והיה כי ישלך בנך מחר לאמור מה זאת, דצאתם, ואמרת אליו בחוזק יד הוציאנו השם ממצרים מבית עבדים. Again, you tell him the story of יציאת מצרים, ויהי כי יקשף פרעה לשלחנו ויהרוג השם כל בכור בארץ מצרים, etc. etc. והיה לאות על ידך מטוטפות בין עיניך, כי בחוזק יד הוציאנו השם ממצרים. So the very plain reason why both of the parshiyot here are a part of the four parshiyot of Tefillin, because Tefillin is mentioned explicitly in both of them, and in both of them the intention of mentioning the parshiyot is to remind us of Yetziat Mitzrayim. But we have two more parshiyot, not in this sefer, but in Parashat Vayitchanan, as we know, in Sefer Dvarim. And there we have Shema and Vaya im Shamua, okay, that we read every day. So Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, ואהבת את השם אלוקיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, ושיננתם לפניך ודיברת בם, וקשרתם לאות על ידך, והיו לטוטפות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות ממניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך וישכיך. So we have here tefillin, later on we have mezuzah, but we have no mentioning of Yetziat Mitzrayim. What do we have here in Shema? We have the tachlit of Am Yisrael, Kabbalat Ol Malchut Shamayim. And then in Perek Yud Aleph, we have ואהבת, והיה אם שמוע תשמעו אל מצוותיי, etc. etc. ולימדתם, ושמתם את דבריי על לבבכם ועל נפשכם, וקשרתם אותם לאות על ידכם, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניכם. So the fourth time in the Torah that it's mentioned is here. Again, like Parasha Gimel of Kriyat Shema, of Shema Yisrael, we have the tefillin, but we don't have Yetziat Mitzrayim. There is no mentioning of Yetziat Mitzrayim. It's very clear. When we say three parshiyot in Kriyat Shema, the first two, we have the first one, Shema Yisrael, we have Ol Malchut Shamayim, and the second one, we have Ol Mitzvot, okay? But we don't have the mentioning of Yetziat Mitzrayim. For that, we have the third parasha of דבר אל השם, פרשת ציצית. And then we have to be mechaven to remember Yetziat Mitzrayim. So let's now sum up the parshiyot of Tefillin. Two of them, Kadesh, Vaya Keviacha, brought at the end of Parashat Bo, are dealing with Zchirat Yetziat Mitzrayim. Two of them, in Parashat Vayitchanan and Parashat Ekev, Perek Vav and Perek Yud Aleph of Sefer Dvorim, mention Tefillin with no relation to Zchirat Yetziat Mitzrayim, but to Kabbalat Ol Malchut Shamayim and Kabbalat Mitzvot. So we have now to see, let's go back to the Parashat Vayitchanan and see Shema Yisrael. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. That's the big Malchut Shamayim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. ואהבת את השם אלוקיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך. So, מה זה הדברים האלה? זה פשט of הדברים האלה is not related to קריאת שמע, but to the former פרק that dealt with עשרת הדיברות. הקדוש ברוך הוא tells at length in פרשת ויתחנן, in פרק ה' all עשרת הדיברות, starting from אנוכי השם אלוקיך, לא יהיה לך, לא תעשה לך, etc. etc. And therefore we have, הקדוש ברוך הוא says in פרק ו', the following one, he says, והיו הדברים האלה, הדברים האלה meaning יציאה, אנוכי השם אלוקיך, you have to remember and put them on the tefillin. So we have to put on the tefillin here we in Kriyat Shema, in the third parasha, we put on the mitzvah of Anuchi Hashem Elokecha that we have learned from Mitzrayim. Okay, and so what we have here is a separation between the Yetziat Mitzrayim that we have in Parashat Bo, and the two of mitzvot of Vayitchanan and Ekev are not connected to Yetziat Mitzrayim, but to Anochi Hashem Elokecha Asher Hotzeticha Me'eretz Mitzrayim. Who am I? So Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that's who I am. And Vayu Advarim Ha'ele, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, and all Aseret HaDibrot, the basic chiyuv of Od Malchut Shamayim that you have seen in Sinai, then you have to put it on the tefillin. So we have 2 or 4 out of 4 parashiyot dealing with Chirat Yetziat Mitzrayim, and we have 2 out of 4 parashiyot of tefillin dealing with the Metzaveh, with the commander, with the Kadosh Baruch Hu himself, that he is the one that took us out of Mitzrayim.
By the way, I heard once that there was a Havamina in Chazal whether to include the Aseret HaDibrot in the tefillin. According to you, it would make sense.
In the
what?
I think the Gemara says in Brachot, Daf Yud Bet, that it was in the tefillah, not in the tefillin, if I remember well. Might be. Okay, I think it was a tefillah. ביקשו חז"ל לומר 10 הדיברות בכל יום, ומפני טורח ציבור they didn't do it, right? That's the same Gemara where in Parashat Bilam and so on, and I don't think it's in the tefillin. If you see otherwise, please let me know. Okay, but what we say now is that half the tefillin, half the parashiyot of tefillin are meant to remember Hakadosh Baruch Hu himself, and Yetziat Mitzrayim. We have
maybe they can't fill in Qumran.
Maybe in Qumran.
With the Aseret HaDibrot.
Really? That's okay. I don't know that they had that, but okay, I'll look up after the show. So the twin of tefillin is mitzvat mezuzah, and we know that mezuzah is shorter than tefillin, because in mezuzah we have just וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו תותפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. That's the first parasha of Kriyat Shema. And again in the second parasha of Kriyat Shema, what we read, the fourth parasha of Tefillin from Parashat Ekev, we have וקשרתם אותם לאות על ידיכם in plural והיו תותפות בין עיניכם וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. So we have again 2 parashiyot dealing with mezuzah, but what do we have in mezuzah? We don't have the parashiyot of Zchirat Yetziat Mitzrayim, because in Perek Yud Gimel of Shmot we didn't find mezuzah. We just have the 2 mitzvot, the 2 parashiyot of mezuzah in relation with Shema and Vayayim Shavuot. Okay? Remember that. And now think of what we said yesterday in the Hebrew Shiur about Korban Pesach, that Am Yisrael used the mezuzah of the bayit in order to put blood on it. So yesterday we said what we said. We said that the bayit is lemaise the mizbeach, and therefore we make the mezuzah into the mizbeach, whatever. But there is a plain pshat that you know all the days, says that you put the blood on the mezuzah in order to prevent the mashchit ולא יבוא המשחית אל בתיכם לנגוף. אוקיי? ולקחו מן הדם ונתנו עוד 2 המזוזות על המשקוף על הבתים אשר הם יאכלו אותו בהם, והיה הדם הזה לכם לאות על הבתים אשר שם, וראיתי את הדם ופסחתי עליכם, ולא יהיה בכם נגף למשחית בהכותי בארץ מצרים. Okay? So here you see that we had the mezuzah in Yetziat Mitzrayim itself. not like mitzvat mezuzah, but the mezuzah as the physical place of the mezuzah was used as a part of Yetziat Mitzrayim. So we have something very interesting. In Yetziat Mitzrayim itself, the mitzvat mezuzah, it was before Matan Torah, obviously, and therefore the mitzvah of mezuzah was the blood spilled or poured on the mezuzah in order to prevent the mashchit from lavo el batechem lignof. After Am Yisrael got out of Egypt and got the Torah, so then the mitzvah of mezuzah ledorot substitute the blood of Yetziat Mitzrayim, and from then on we don't need to remember Yetziat Mitzrayim and Mitzvat Mezuzah. That's why we have in Mezuzah just two parshiyot, because in Tefillin we have to remember Anochi Hashem Elokecha in two parshiyot, and the remembrance of Anochi Hashem Elokecha Asher Hotzeticha Me'eretz Mitzrayim. And therefore we have two parshiyot dealing with Yetziat Mitzrayim in Parashat Bo, and two parshiyot Vayitchanan and Ekev dealing with Anochi Hashem Elokecha. But in Mitzvat Mezuzah, we don't have to remember Yetziat Mitzrayim, because Yetziat Mezuzah is not something that reminds us of Yetziat Mitzrayim. Mezuzah is a substitute to what we had in Yetziat Mitzrayim, because in Yetziat Mitzrayim we had blood on the mezuzah, and instead of that, now Baruch Hashem we don't have to put blood. We put the klaf, as we know, the klaf, on the klaf it's written Shin Dalet Yud, the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you know that mezuzah in the halacha is chovat hadar, is the chova, is obligatory of the person who lives in the house. Somebody asked me today, if you are a maskir, a renter, you're renting out a dira, an apartment, and you have somebody who rents a house, who has to put the mezuzah? He, the person who lives there. And when he leaves the apartment, he might basically take the mezuzot. Why? Because it's a shmira. Rashi says in Menoches and Psochim that menucha chovat hadar, because pnei shehi meshamrato, meaning to say that the mezuzah keeps or saves the person from pgaim, and therefore we have some in mezuzah, as we said before, we don't have four parshiyot because we don't need. It's the same kli of the mezuzah is used instead of the blood that used in Yetziat Mitzrayim. So we have a definition of tefillin. We know why we have four parshiyot: two to remind us of Yetziat Mitzrayim, two to remind us of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and in mezuzah we have just HaKadosh Baruch Hu because Yetziat Mitzrayim was we used mezuzah bedavka. Okay, now we'll go to Brit Milah, as we started the shiur with. And we said that tefillin and mezuzah are twins, and tefillin has four parshiyot and mezuzah has two. Who is a twin of Milah? Dam Pesach, okay? Pesach, Korban Pesach. As we said, as we started, they are both the only mitzvot aseh on which you have karet. Okay, I'll read a part of Shmot Rabbah, Parasha Yud Zayin. מה ראה הקדוש ברוך הוא להגן עליהם בדם? בשני דמים ניצולו בני ישראל, בדם פסח ובדם מילה, שנאמר ואומר לך בדמי חיי ואומר לך בדמי חיי. So we know that Am Yisrael circumcised himself before they went out of Mitzrayim, and they had the dam of the Korban Pesach, and the two damim saved them from the Mitzrayim. So we have a linkage between Dam Milah and Dam Pesach, a second linkage. The first one is their din, that it's a mitzvah to say that has koret if you don't do it. And as we mentioned, the reason for that, because it's a part of your nationality, the individual nationality. You belong to Am Yisrael by being circumcised, and the general nationality by joining the tzibur in Yetziat Mitzrayim, or the day of independence, okay, of the nation. But we have another thing in both of them, a third dimion between them. If you look in דם המזוזה of קורבן פסח, משה warns עם ישראל, ואתם לא תצאו איש מפתח ביתו עד בוקר. Don't leave your house till the morning. ועבר השם לנגוף את מצרים, וראה השם את הפתח, ולא ייתן המשחית לבוא אל בתיכם לנגוף. And as we said yesterday, if you take the Korban Pesach out of the house, because yesterday we defined it as the house as a Mizbeach, you take Kodashim out of the place of the Mizbeach, and therefore that's also לא תוציא מן הבית, מן הבשר חוצה, ועצם לא תשברו בו. Why shouldn't you take it out of the house? Because it's like leaving the holy place of the Mizbeach. Okay? So we have now, look, we have two chotamot, or two shmirot of domim, of bloods. We have dam habrit, and we have dam Pesach. Dam habrit, dam Pesach is spread on שתי המזוזות ועל המשקוף, and he defines the house as a Jewish house, but it prevents you from getting outside, and if outside the מלאך המוות, הקדוש ברוך הוא hits מצרים, so you don't do that. So the same thing happens with דם מילה. דם מילה, you have blood on the body, but it prevents the zera, the kedushat Israel, to go out to be tome like the goyim. Okay, so we have the same thing, a burden, a barrier, a machsom that you have on the blood, the blood on the bodies, the dam of Milah is a barrier that prevents the person להיטמא לטומאת הגויים, כן, וכמו שכתוב ולא תטמאו בם וכולי, או וצאצאיו חתם באות ברית קודש, it keeps the kedusha, and it doesn't let you נטמא. יחזקאל says, ותרבה את תזנוניה, he talks about עם ישראל with all the sins, נזכור את ימי נעוריה אשר זנתה בארץ מצרים, אשר בשר חמורים בשרם וזרמת סוסים זרמתם. We know that ארץ מצרים is considered like the whole טומאות of אומות העולם, and therefore keeping the קדושת ישראל, preventing us from getting outside. The same thing happens in the HaPesach. You put it, you are a part of a Jewish home, and therefore you prevent yourself from getting outside. We might even say that every person has two houses or two definitions. First one is his bais, but not the house, his family. Okay? וכיפר בעדו ועד ביתו. Okay? And you have another definition, the house, the dwelling place, okay, where you dwell, where you live, and ואיש אשר כי יקדיש את ביתו קודש להשם, כן, הוא לא מקדיש את הבת שלו או את האישה שלו, הוא מקדיש את הבית שלו, okay, that's what פרשת בחוקותיי deals with. In קורבן פסח we have the same thing. At the beginning we have, דבר בני ישראל ויקחו להם בעשור לחודש הזה, איש שא לבית אבות, שא לבית. What does a bite here means? Not for the house, for the family. But ולקח הוא ושכנו הקרוב אל ביתו. Here הוא לא קרוב למשפחה שלו, הוא שכן, he's just a neighbor, הקרוב is adjacent to his house, to his home, okay, to the building. So again, we have the two definitions, the basic definitions of a family and a house. Am Israel, when they went out of Mitzrayim, they had independence. The Eved, the slave, has two things that he is not Ben Chori. he is not ben chorin in his family, as we know from Parashat Mishpatim, im Adonav iten lo isha v'yalda lo banim o banot, meaning to say that he doesn't have the freedom to choose his wife. His master gives him his wife, and therefore he's just a producer of kids. Okay, that's one. But not only that he doesn't have a family, but he doesn't have a place to live. Okay, how do we know that? Because in the Yom Kippur, in the Yovel, the Jubilee, it's called V'kratem dror ma'aretz lechol yoshvea. Rabbi Yehuda says, ma'u leshon dror? Shedar bechol makom shu rotze. So the definition of freedom is to live wherever you want. A slave cannot decide where to live. He just has to live in one place where he is told to. And so we see now that Am Yisrael, when they went out of Mitzrayim and got their freedom, so they had the two values of freedom. First, they had a family. From now on, they are no longer slaves, and that's why Chazal said a lot of things about the women in Mitzrayim, that they were keeping them and helping the husbands and preventing them to fall down and to be in depression. And later on, when they went out of Mitzrayim, not only did they had the family, they had the houses. Okay, they had the reshut to choose the place where they dwell. Korban Pesach is the same thing. You eat it with your family. ולקח הוא צא לבית אבות, צא לבית. You do it with a family. You gain your family. Therefore, you have freedom. But not only that you do it with a family, you do it with your neighbor. By this, you say, this is my house and I invite people. You might ask me, so what would the neighbor do? Okay, so we have to separate it. Half the people invite and half the people are invited. Okay, but never mind. If I invite somebody, so I symbolize that it's my house and I'm enabling others to share with me. I cannot share with me the family. I can share with me the accommodation, the house, the building, the physical place. And therefore, we open the door in Leila Seder and say, Kol dichfin yeitei veyechol. Okay, we invite to the house, not only to the family, but to the house. So we have the same Korban Pesach, the same two freedoms of the family and the house. If you remember the first time that we meet, according to Chazal, it's not explicit in the Tanakh, Pesach, we find it by Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu, והוא כחום היום, at the beginning of Parashat Vayera, Rashi says that אותו יום פסח היה. Because they would say, the Malachim would say, כעת חיה ולשרה בן, and we know that Yitzchak, it's Rosh Hashanah Daf Yud Aleph, Yitzchak was born on Pesach, and therefore they say that it was Pesach Haya. Okay? Umatzot afav yochelu. Later on they'll go to Lot. It was Pesach. Okay. Avraham Avinu sits in the entrance to his tent, and he opens his house, his tent, to the public. Kol dichfin yeitei veyechol. Okay? But on the other hand, he's the same day circumcised. Okay? So, as we said before, the petach of Milah is not open. Because if it's open as chas v'shalom, we'll have tumat goyim. So the petach of Milah, it's a barrier, it's a shar, it's a gate that prevents us from being nitma in umot ha'olam. So he has, from the one hand, dam Milah, and from the other hand, he has the petach ha'oel to call other people to share not only with his family, but with his house. It's very interesting that we started from, let's go back to it, with Perek Yud Gimel of Parashat Shmot, and then we saw the two mitzvot, the two parshiot of Tefillin, dealing with Yetziat Mitzrayim, and at the end we saw Tefillin, Vaya lecha leot al yadecha, and we didn't see mezuzah, and that's why we don't have in the mezuzah the two former parshiot, but we saw Pidyon Haben as well. וכל פטר חמור, ועברת כל פטר רחם להשם, וכל פטר שגר בהמה, אשר יהיה לך זכרים להשם. וכל פטר חמור תפדה בשה, ואם לא תפדה וערפתו, that's one issue, וכל בכור אדם בבניך תפדה. So we have here the mitzvah of פדיון בכור. How much do you pay for the Kohen, for your son? Not written here. Where is it written? Just at the beginning of Parashat Bamidbar. Then HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells, bring Shevet Levi, and then make the Levim instead of the Bechorim, make the Tachlif, את הבכורות in the Levim, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, ולקחת חמשת שקלים לגולגולת, בשקל הקודש תיקח 20 גרה השקל. But here, in our parsha, the pshat, it's not written. It's not the pshat. It's not written. Okay? It's totally not written. בכור אדם בבניך תפדה. Just a comparison between בכור בהמה, that you make it instead of Chamor, instead of Chamor, you take a se, and v'chol bechor adam bevanecha tifde. What's the price here for your son? So we might say that in, let's call it as we said, before Matan Torah, when you just get out of Mitzrayim, v'chol bechor adam bevanecha tifde, לא ב5 סלעים, תפדה אותו בשה. תפדה אותו בקורבן פסח. כמו שיצחק, like יצחק, that he was קורבן, and just because Abraham found the isle, he could switch and substitute יצחק in the isle. The same thing happens to כאילו זה קדושת בכורות. In Yetziat Mitzrayim, Am Yisrael was in danger because Malach was looking around and trying to find all the Bechorot of the world. And he found all the Bechorot in Mitzrayim and killed them. And he tried to find Bechorot of Am Yisrael. But Am Yisrael stayed in the house and kept the Kedushat HaBayit and Kedushat HaMishpacha, and therefore Am Yisrael wasn't Nitma, etc., etc. So, Am Yisrael instead has to take the Seh and substitute it in, to take his son and substitute it in the Seh. So now we see that there is another linkage between Milah and Pesach, because we started from the Mitzvah Aseh. We started from that they are both symbolizing the house and preventing you from getting outside. Now we say that Mitzvat Milah is to circumcise the son and making him into a Jew, and the mitzvat Korban Pesach saying that in Yetziat Mitzrayim, since your Bechor was saved, so you have to kill him, to kill the Seh instead of him, you have to kill Korban Pesach, and the Korban Pesach is used as a substitute of your son. It's not just for the family, it's just for the sons, for the Bechorot that you have in the family. Therefore, you substitute it in the Seh, like mamash like Kedat Yitzchak. Now, again, we said 2 minutes ago that Yitzchak was born on Pesach, so the whole story is very nice because Yitzchak was born on Pesach, and we have the substitute of every Bechor with the Seh. That was in Yetziat Mitzrayim. But what happens after Yetziat Mitzrayim? Then we forget from the need to substitute our Bechor in a Seh, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu would later say that if you make Pidyon Bechor in Sefer Bamidbar, don't do it as you did it on Yetziat Mitzrayim with blood, with the Seh. Do it from now on in 5 Slaim. So it's mamash like mezuzah. In mezuzah, in Yetziat Mitzrayim, we had you put the blood on the door. And later on, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, from now on, don't do it on the door. From now on, you don't need blood, put just the cloth with the mezuzah. The same thing happens with Pidyon Bechor. In Yetziat Mitzrayim, the year of Schirat Yetziat Mitzrayim, you substitute your son in Seh, and therefore you have to be Makrib the Seh, okay? And that's the real reason of the Korban Pesach, and that's why the kesher of Milah and Korban Pesach, because the Milah of your son is a part of Makdishin Oto LaKadosh Baruch Hu, instead of being killed by the Kadosh Baruch Hu like any other Bechor. But from now on, you won't do it with the Seh. From now on, if is your Bechor, you'll give just 5 sloim out instead of him. That's it for now. Good preparations and good night. Shavua tov. Laila tov.
לילה טוב, תודה.
Laila tov. Toda.